Okay, so today this realistic LAB-1500 linear tracking turntable followed me home for just $20, and the seller indicated that it needs a new drive belt and it needs a new stylus. So let's see what we've got. So I was not able to find the manuals for this realistic turntable online, but I did read that it was made by Hitachi and was identical to Hitachi's HTL33, and having downloaded the manuals for that turntable, I can see that is obviously true, so these should be helpful. So the platter mat's in pretty good condition, it looks like, and it has these special cutouts in it to sense the size of the record that you put on it. And there's definitely no belt there, but the platter is spinning pretty well. So the entire linear tracking mechanism is actually located in the lid of this turntable, which makes it less accessible than, for example, that other realistic I worked on. But let's take a look at the stylus. So it powers up. So if we lift the lid, to gain access to the cartridge, there is a little button right here, which clearly is an interlock. So when the lid is down, the mechanism will work, and when the lid is up, it won't. But if we press that button, we can actually make it do something. So I'm going to press the button and then press the Q left button and see what happens here. And it seems to be moving pretty smoothly. No weird sounds. So that's good. So we can get it all the way to the middle here. Then I'm going to turn it off. And then we can access the cartridge. So this is a P-mount cartridge. So there's one screw on this side of it. So I'm going to loosen it. You have to pull the screw out, and then the cartridge will slide forward. There is a nut on the left side of this that will fall out. So be careful not to lose that. But this should now pull straight out. So the stylus on this cartridge has clearly had it, but as luck would have it, I have an identical Audio-Technica realistic cartridge. So once I get the turntable running, I am going to test the stylus from the cartridge I have on the body that I just acquired to make sure it's working properly before I order another one. So this platter spins pretty well. Seems like the bearing is in good shape. But to remove it to get to the belt, this simply pulls straight up. And yes, in fact, there is no belt here. So to make sure the motor actually works, I'm going to confuse it again by pressing this button here to start it up. And I can put my finger on the motor over here and feel that it is turning. Don't know if it's going at the right speed, but it is certainly moving. So there's quite a bit of black residue where the belt used to be, I guess where it died, and also on the pulley of the motor. So I'm going to have to clean that off with some cotton swabs and alcohol and get the motor running to do that. So I put a clamp on the switch to make it think that the lid is closed. I'm going to power it up and then press start. So it's going to move over and the motor is going to turn. So I'm going to take a cotton swab, push it against the motor pulley to clean all that junk off of it. So that motor pulley is so cruddy that I think I'd rather take the motor out and access it from below rather than try to get it all clean from the top. So I wanted to open it up anyway. So there's just screws around the perimeter here. They're all the same, plus one here in the middle. This one is gold, so you know it's different. And this lifts off. So things look pretty clean under here. This is a RF shield for the tone arm wires. The suspension is interesting. There's these rubber feet with a spring underneath, and unfortunately they're not in as good shape as I thought they were from looking at it from below. So I might want to do something else with this, but this is what we want right here. So interestingly, the motor is not screwed in at all. It's just got rubber mountings on it, and it pulls right out. So this is a real mess. The old belt has just completely turned to goo. So I'm having to use an X-Acto knife to gently scrape off as much of this as I can, again without damaging the pulley. So this is still not getting the results that I want, so I think I'd like to soak this in a solvent. Well, how to do that? Well, I'm going to try this rubber cap, which is used for metal shelving. I'm going to fill it up with WD-40 and then stick it on here, upside down obviously, and soak it for several hours and see if some of that gunk will come off. Soaking it in WD-40 helped, but not that much. So I'm going to try it now, again with that little cap, with some citrus degreaser. So the degreaser got the black gunk from the deteriorated belt off, but still left behind the green corrosion on this brass pulley. So what finally did the trick was soaking it in white vinegar. This looks pretty good now and is ready for a new belt. So the bearing felt pretty good, but while I'm under here, I think I'm going to try to service it from below. So taking out these 4 screws should do the trick. Okay, so this just pulls out, fits very tightly, and if we look inside, there's no ball bearing to lose there. So I'm going to clean this up with some Q-tips and alcohol and lubricate it with 3-in-1 motor oil and put it back together. So there are controls on the circuit board here to adjust the speed at both 33 and 45, which is nice. These are not accessible when the base plate of the turntable is screwed on though. So if there need to be adjustments, I'll have to do it from underneath when the turntable is not put back together. So with the exception of those speed controls, there aren't any other moving parts on the underside of the turntable to attend to. So I'm going to place the base plate back on because otherwise there's actually nothing to hold the motor and the transformer in. They rest on the base plate. So since I don't want them to fall out, I'm going to put that back on and flip it over and give the top side some tension. The linear tracking mechanism seems to work pretty well, but since it is 40 years old, I think I should probably have a look at it. So to get to it, there's 4 screws. So these 2 on the outside hold this mechanism onto the lid, and these 2 here hold the mechanism onto the hinges. So inside the mechanism we have a lot of dust and a lot of plastic parts. Everything looks pretty much okay. The belt for the tone arm drive motor looks okay. And actually the grease looks okay here too. So since this seems to have been serviced somewhat recently and it does work, I'm going to leave it alone for now, and rather than mess something up. So this is interesting. It looks like the mounts for the cover broke and the previous owner has glued in some nuts that the screws thread into. And it seems to work, so maybe I'll just leave it be and see if it'll hold. I'm also going to clean the inner rim of the platter here, which also has residue from that belt on it, with some Goo Gone and paper towels. So the new belt has arrived. The easiest way to install it is to stretch it around the base of the platter like this. Then flip it over, install the platter, and this will spin freely. Then use your fingers, or if you can't grab it, use something that's not going to hurt the belt, like a pencil or something, to stretch it over the pulley. Make sure it's not twisted. And give it a few turns by hand, and that should do it. Okay, the belt is installed, and I've also reinstalled the cartridge with the stylus from the other cartridge that was brand new, which I knew was good. So if it works here, this cartridge is good too, and I can finally give this thing a try. Power it up, close the lid, and press start. And what do you know? It sets down in the right spot, and got headphones hooked up, and we have sound, and it sounds just fine. Has a nice feature where there's a little pause after the stylus sets down before the audio comes on, so you don't hear that loud pop. So that is really promising. Let's try this. I'm going to lift the cue. I'm going to move it over. Oops. Put it down. That works too. So let's see if it picks up at the end of the record. And that looks really good. So now I'm going to test the speed, and according to the service manual, first of all, you're supposed to do this only after it's been running for about 10 minutes, so that's good to know. And you're going to check the 33 first and adjust that first, and then the 45. So let's give it a shot. That is disappointing. That is running a little bit too fast on 33 and on 45. Also out of spec. Now, unfortunately, this is going to be a real pain to adjust because, again, those potentiometers are not accessible from the bottom of the turntable unless you take the base off. So when you turn a turntable upside down, if the platter is installed, it's going to have a tendency to fall off, whether it's a belt drive or a direct drive turntable. And since the stylus is in the lid here, that would be a bad thing. So before I even try to adjust it, I'm going to have to take the platter off, take the belt off, flip it over, remove the base, flip it back over, reinstall the platter and belt to test the speed and adjust it. Okay, so I can now get to these potentiometers, but there's another problem. So when I flip the turntable back over and put the platter and the belt back on to check the speed and adjust it, the motor and the transformer are not screwed in. They're held in by the base plate. So when I flip it back over, I'm going to have to support them with something to hold them up so they don't fall out, which would defeat the purpose, obviously. So that's a real pain. So while I'm under here, I'm also going to give these some deoxit treatment, since I'm going to be moving them anyway. So I'm going to turn these back and forth and return them to approximately the same position where they started. So I let the excess deoxit evaporate. Actually, I let it sit overnight. I've flipped it back over, put the turntable back together. I have warmed it up by playing a record for more than 10 minutes. I have a clamp on the switch so that it will turn on, and let's check the speed. So already that is an improvement, but we can do better. So underneath, so again, I have it supported, and there are two potentiometers here for 33 and 45. The 33 one is the one that is closest to me, toward the front of the turntable. So we're going to adjust that one first, and then follow with the 45. You have to use a very short screwdriver to get under there, but that is the 33, looking good. So 45 RPM is looking good. Switch back to 33. Give that another little tweak. 33. 45. 33. I think that's about as good as I can get it. And now for the feet. So a couple of the original feet for this turntable were in good condition, but the other two really were not. So I don't see any way I can make this work. So I decided to go once again with some stick-on feet. So since this is a pretty light turntable, I wanted to use softer, squishier ones. These are 20 Durometer Sorbothane. These I got from Hudson Hi-Fi. So I'm cleaning this with some alcohol. I'm going to stick them on like that. So I acquired this turntable for $20. The most expensive part turned out to be the stylus at $28. The belt was $10. The feet $11 for a total cost of about $69. And that's job done. This turntable works perfectly now, and it sounds great. And it was a real pleasure to work on. So this was not a high-end turntable, even when it was brand new 40 years ago. But in its present condition, I would think this would be better than most entry-level turntables that you'd buy today. And it was, again, a lot of fun to work on it and bring it back. Thanks for watching.